This is a dramatized story inspired by real debt situations. For educational and entertainment purposes only. Not legal or financial advice.
$78,000. That's what my marriage left behind. Not memories, not a savings account, debt. And at 43, I had no idea how I was going to survive it. My name is Karen. I'm a registered nurse. I work 12-hour shifts. I come home to 2 kids. And for 8 months after my divorce was finalized, I smiled at my coworkers and told everyone I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was drowning, and the water was rising every single night. Let me take you back to where it actually started, because this didn't happen all at once. It never does. Daniel and I had been married for 11 years. We met in our late 20s, bought a house in Ohio at 31, and thought we were doing everything right. 2 incomes, a mortgage we could technically afford, a joint credit card we told ourselves was for emergencies only. By the time our youngest was born, Daniel had lost his construction job. The plan was always that he'd find something new. That was 3 years before the divorce. In those 3 years, the emergency credit card became the grocery card. The grocery card became the car repair card, and then it became the "we're not talking about this" card. When I finally sat down with the paperwork, really sat down with it, here's what I found. Joint credit card number 1, $21,400. Joint credit card number 2, $14,800. A personal loan Daniel had taken out in both our names without telling me, $9,500. Medical bills from our son's appendix surgery 2 years earlier that we'd been ignoring, $11,200. My own car loan, still running, $8,900. And then there was the mortgage, $187,000 remaining on a house that had dropped in value. The divorce settlement gave me the house. It also gave me all of it, every dollar of shared debt. Because Daniel had nothing left to split. I remember the night I added it all up. My kids were asleep. I had a yellow legal pad, the kind I used to use for nursing notes in school, and I wrote every number down. Then I circled the total at the bottom. $78,000, not counting the mortgage. I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I just stared at that number like it was a diagnosis I didn't know how to read. The call started in February. Collection agencies don't care that you just went through a divorce. They don't care that you work overnight shifts and you're trying to sleep at 2 p.m. The phone rings, and there's a voice on the other end that sounds patient but isn't, and they want to know when you're sending the money. I started letting everything go to voicemail. Then I stopped listening to the voicemails. I bought a second phone for work calls so I could pretend the first phone didn't exist. My kids would ask me why my phone was always on silent, and I'd say, "Mommy's tired of spam calls." That was a lie. That was shame pretending to be a joke. My daughter Emma is 11. She's smart. She started noticing things. That we weren't going out to eat anymore, that I'd stopped buying new shoes, that I flinched every time the mail arrived. One Saturday morning, she came downstairs and found me at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere, and she said, "Mom, are we going to lose the house?" I told her no. I didn't know if that was true. The worst part about financial crisis is how it follows you everywhere. I'm a nurse. I take care of people in their worst moments. I hold hands during procedures. I stay calm in emergencies. I know how to breathe through hard things. But I would finish a 12-hour shift, walk to my car in the parking garage, and just sit there, not ready to go home, not ready to face the kitchen table and the mail and the calculator that kept giving me the same terrible answer. I made the wrong moves first. I want to be honest about that. The first wrong move was a balance transfer. I found a card offering 0% APR for 15 months and transferred $12,000 of the highest interest debt onto it. It felt like a win for about 3 weeks. Then I did the math. Even if I paid $800 a month, at which I couldn't sustain, I wouldn't pay it off in 15 months. And when that promotional period ended, the rate was going to jump to 26. 99%, I had solved nothing. I had just moved the problem into a smaller box. The second wrong move was a payday loan. I know how that sounds. But in March, my car needed brake work and I didn't have $600. So I took a $600 payday loan. 2 weeks later, they wanted $780. I didn't have $780 either, so I rolled it over. By the time I finally paid it off 6 weeks later, that $600 repair had cost me $1,100. That's not borrowing money. That's renting money at a price no one should ever pay. The third wrong move was the one I'm most ashamed of. I pulled $4,000 out of my 403(b), my retirement account. I needed to make a mortgage payment and 2 minimum credit card payments, or I was going to get hit with late fees on top of everything else. So I cashed out. What I didn't fully calculate was the tax penalty. Early withdrawal means a 10% penalty plus income tax. That $4,000 ended up costing me closer to $5,400 when tax season came. I robbed my future self to barely tread water in the present. April is when things actually started to change. And it didn't start with a breakthrough. It started with a coworker named Teresa. Teresa had been through a divorce of her own 5 years earlier. We were in the break room, it was 2 a.m, and I don't even remember how it came up. But suddenly, I was telling her the truth. All of it. The $78,000, the collection calls, the payday loan. Emma's question about the house. Teresa didn't look at me with pity. She just nodded and said, "Did you ever talk to a nonprofit credit counselor?" I hadn't. I didn't really know what that was. She told me that there are nonprofit credit counseling agencies, some of them certified by the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, that don't charge you to talk. You sit down with a counselor, you lay out your full financial picture, and they tell you what your actual options are. No sales pitch, no pressure. I made an appointment for the following Thursday. I brought my yellow legal pad. The counselor's name was Marcus. He was calm, methodical, and in the first 10 minutes, he said something that I needed to hear. "The number is high, but it's not the highest number I've seen this week, and you have income. That matters." We went through everything. Marcus explained that I had a few realistic paths. The first was a debt management plan, sometimes called a DMP. Through the credit counseling agency, they negotiate with creditors to reduce interest rates, sometimes significantly, and you make one monthly payment to the agency instead of juggling multiple creditors. It doesn't eliminate debt, but it structures it. It typically takes 3 to 5 years. The second option, Marcus explained, was debt settlement. That's where you negotiate, or hire a company to negotiate, to pay less than you owe in a lump sum. The risk is real. Your credit score takes a major hit, sometimes 100 points or more on your FICO score, and the forgiven amount can sometimes be treated as taxable income by the IRS. It's not a clean fix, and Marcus told me to be very careful about any for-profit company that promises to settle my debt for pennies on the dollar. Those promises are often hollow. The third option was bankruptcy. Marcus didn't say it with shame. He said it the way a doctor says, "We may need to consider surgery." Not as a failure, but as a legitimate medical tool when other treatments aren't working. He explained the 2 types most relevant to someone in my situation. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy is sometimes called liquidation bankruptcy. If you qualify, and there's a means test based on your income and state median, it can discharge most unsecured debt, meaning credit cards and medical bills. The process typically takes 3 to 6 months. The impact on your FICO score is serious. It stays on your credit report for 10 years. But for some people, it's the fastest path to actually starting over. Chapter 13 is different. It's a reorganization. You keep your assets, including your house, and you repay a structured portion of your debt over 3 to 5 years through a court-approved payment plan. If I wanted to protect my home from foreclosure and keep building some equity, Chapter 13 was worth considering. The bankruptcy stays on my credit report for 7 years instead of 10. Marcus was careful. He said, "I'm giving you a general education. Before you make any decision, especially about bankruptcy, you need to sit down with a licensed bankruptcy attorney." He told me that many bankruptcy attorneys offer free initial consultations and that I should talk to more than one before deciding anything. I want to be very clear here. Nothing in what Marcus told me and nothing in this story is legal advice. Everyone's situation is different. What worked for someone else might not be right for you. Please, Consult a licensed professional before making any financial or legal decisions. But here's what that conversation gave me that the payday loan and the balance transfer and the 403B withdrawal never gave me: information. Real, specific, non-panicked information. For the first time in 8 months, I wasn't making decisions out of fear. I was starting to understand what my actual choices were. I went home that night and I sat at the kitchen table again. Same yellow legal pad. Same terrible numbers. But this time I wrote 4 columns at the top. Debt management plan. Debt settlement. Chapter 7, Chapter 13. And I started filling in what I'd learned. I scheduled a free consultation with a bankruptcy attorney the following week. Her name was Sandra, and she spent an hour with me. She confirmed that based on my income as a nurse and Ohio's median income thresholds, I likely qualified for Chapter 13, and that Chapter 13 would let me catch up on the mortgage arrears I'd fallen behind on while protecting the house from foreclosure. I want to be honest. I haven't crossed the finish line. This isn't a 6 months later, everything is perfect story, because that's not where I am. I filed for Chapter 13 protection. My case was confirmed. I make 1 monthly payment to the bankruptcy trustee. The collection calls stopped. Legally, they have to stop once you file. That silence was the first thing I noticed. Actual silence at 2 p.m. when I was trying to sleep. My FICO score dropped. I won't pretend it didn't. It was 6-41 before I filed. It fell to 558. I know it'll take time to rebuild, but I'm not losing the house. I'm not rolling over payday loans. I'm not hiding mail from my own children. A few weeks after I filed, Emma came downstairs on a Saturday morning again. I was at the kitchen table. She looked at the papers, and then she looked at me and she said, "You seem different, Mom." I said, "I found some help." She said, "Good." And she poured herself cereal and sat down next to me. That was enough. That was more than enough. If you are sitting at your own kitchen table right now with your own yellow legal pad and your own terrible number circled at the bottom, I need you to hear this. The number is not of the story. It is one chapter, and there are people, nonprofit credit counselors, bankruptcy attorneys, HUD-approved housing counselors, who deal with these numbers every single day and do not see them as shameful. They see them as problems with possible solutions. Don't take the payday loan, don't raid the retirement account, don't disappear into silence, and let the collection agency calls pile up in your voicemail. Make the call. Make the appointment. Sit down with someone who knows what the actual options are. You deserve to sleep. Your kids deserve a mom or a dad who isn't flinching at the mailbox. And the situation, no matter how much that circled number scares you, is very rarely as hopeless as it feels at 2 a.m. Get the free debt checklist linked in the description. It walks you through how to list your debts, calculate your debt-to-income ratio, and identify which debt relief path might be worth exploring first. The link is below. And if this story helped you feel a little less alone tonight, please subscribe. There are more stories here and more information that might be exactly what someone you love needs to hear.